or view the end of history from the vantage point of an investor. Suppose you as an investor had believed Francis Fukuyama in the summer of 1989 and had invested your savings exclusively in the West, in Europe and North America. Well, in nominal terms, your European portfolio would have increased by a factor of 3.6 since then. Your North American portfolio would have done better. It would have increased by a factor of 5.2 in nominal dollar terms. But your rival, who disbelieved Fukuyama and invested all her money in non-Western markets, would have cleaned your clock, to use a colloquial Wall Street expression, because emerging markets in the same 24-year period rose by a factor of 6.2. In investment terms, the West certainly hasn't triumphed. The smart thing was to invest against the Fukuyama thesis. It turns out that the real historical trend was quite different from the one that Fukuyama identified. The biggest story of our lifetimes is probably best described as the Great Reconvergence, the end of that 500-year period of divergence which put the West in a position of quite exceptional dominance over the rest of the world. The Great Divergence made Westerners much richer than everybody else, made them healthier and longer lived than everybody else, made them more powerful than everybody else, made their culture more influential than everybody else's. The end of the Great Divergence is the big story of our time. Not the triumph of the West, but the end of the triumph of the West. To illustrate this point in strictly economic terms, in 1979, which was, I think, in many ways a more significant year than 1989, as I've argued on more than one occasion, the average American was 30 times richer than the average Chinese. But today, the average American is just 5 times richer than the average Chinese. And if the OECD's projections are to be believed, within just a few decades, that ratio will be down to 2 to 1. The shift that we are witnessing away from Western triumph towards something more like a balanced world is the most important historical event of our lifetimes. And what I want to do this afternoon is to try to offer some historical perspectives on that great shift. What are the real drivers? What are the forces propelling the great reconvergence? I think there are 2. And it helps to think of them using terminology from the realm of development economics. And if any of you here study development, what I'm about to say will seem quite familiar to you. There is a consensus, though it's not universal, I'd say it was a majority opinion, amongst development economists, that the most important thing a poor country can do, if it is to become richer, is to improve its institutions. No amount of investment, no amount of aid will achieve much if the institutions are broken, if the governance is fundamentally corrupt, if civil war or crime are endemic. Don't take it from me, take it from Paul Collier, my old friend at Oxford, whose work on African economic development has been some of the most important work in the field in recent years, or Hernando de Soto, whose work on the mystery of capital has illuminated what it was that was keeping Peru poor and what it is that is keeping Egypt poor. There's a second phenomenon, though, that I want to draw your attention to. Now, one of the challenges of delivering a lecture on a sunny day, just as the holidays begin in Norway, without the assistance of fancy PowerPoint slides, is to retain the attention of your audience. And this can only be done with constant variation in your tone and pace of speaking. Woke you up. So the second driver of the Great Reconvergence is the more interesting because it is the less studied of the two. But it is actually the corollary of the first. If it is true that poor countries get rich by improving their institutions, surely it must also be true that rich countries become poor if their institutions get worse. I mean, who ever claimed that good institutions would just stay good forever? At the heart of Western political theory, after all, from ancient times, has been a fundamental skepticism that such would be the case. We, in fact, tend to assume quite rightly that institutions deteriorate, that republics slide into tyranny, that democracies give way to oligarchy. I want to suggest to you that a process of institutional deterioration has been going on in the West, in the rich countries, and it has been going on largely unnoticed. It is a separate phenomenon from the improvement of institutions that we see in the non-Western world, but it is as much a factor in the Great Reconvergence as that improvement of non-Western institutions.